Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump and Japan's Prime Minister Takaichi declaring the golden age of their alliance while inking deals that deflect rising threats from Beijing. And the president announces new multi-billion-dollar investments. States sued the Trump administration for suspending food stamps amid the government shutdown, what they argue should happen instead. Expect air travel delays amid the shutdown. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy delivers a message on behalf of air traffic controllers. Legal pain for the makers of Tylenol. The Texas Attorney General is suing the medication makers, claiming deceptive marketing to pregnant women and alleged links to increased risk of autism. The United States continues cracking down on drug traffickers trying to smuggle narcotics. The military hit 4 more boats, killing 14 alleged drug traffickers.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
And thank you for joining us today. The United States continues cracking down on drug traffickers trying to smuggle narcotics into the U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth says the military hit 4 boats, killing a total of 14 alleged drug traffickers. Hegseth said the Department of War carried out 3 lethal kinetic strikes on 4 vessels operated by designated terrorist organizations trafficking narcotics in the Eastern Pacific. 1 person survived the strikes. According to Hegseth, Mexican authorities assumed responsibility for coordinating his rescue. It's not clear if that person will stay in Mexican custody or be handed over to the U.S. The action marks an increase in the pace of strikes, which began in early September. It's the first time multiple strikes were announced in a single day. In a strong show of force, just 2 days before President Trump's high-stakes meeting with Xi Jinping, the U.S. and Japan assert their military alliance in front of 6,000 American troops in Yokosuka, and the president signs yet another agreement to break China's monopoly on rare earth resources. NTD's Mari Otsu brings us the latest from Tokyo.
Born out of the ashes of a terrible war, our bond has grown over 8 decades into the beautiful friendship that we have. It's a foundation of peace and security in the Pacific.
Aboard the USS George Washington in Yokosuka, President Trump and Japan's newly elected Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi declare a golden age for their alliance.
This woman is a winner. So now I have a really great respect for the new and incredible Prime Minister. And I have to say this, the first female Prime Minister in the history of Japan.
Takaichi vows to take what she calls the world's greatest alliance to even greater heights.
We are facing an unprecedented severe security environment. Peace cannot be preserved by words alone, only when there is an unwavering determination and action.
Takaichi has long fought to raise Japan's defense budget and rewrite its pacifist constitution, a stance that's in alignment with President Trump's peace through strength posture.
No enemy will ever even dream of threatening America's Navy. And if they do, the American sailor stands ready to crush them and sink them and wreck them and blast them into oblivion, right?
Japan is committed to fundamentally reinforce its defense capabilities, and Japan is ready to contribute even more proactively to peace and stability of the region.
And in a move that puts steel behind that shared vision, President Trump announces the first U.S. missiles for Japan's F-45s land this week ahead of schedule.
Just want to tell Madam Prime Minister, they've been waiting for those missiles, and we got them here right away.
He also announces plans for Toyota to invest over $10 billion in the U.S.
So that's Toyota, so go out and buy a Toyota.
This comes as President Trump and Takaichi sign a rare earths framework, with both nations seeking to reduce China's monopoly in the sector, a resource that Beijing has weaponized in trade wars. Meanwhile, in soft diplomacy, Prime Minister Takaichi gifts 250 flowering cherry trees to Washington, D.C. in celebration of America's 250th birthday. And for President Trump personally, a golf bag signed by major winner Hideki Matsuyama, plus the putter of Shinzo Abe, the late Prime Minister and President Trump's close ally, which Abe used during President Trump's Japan visit. On Wednesday, President Trump jets off for South Korea, where he'll be making remarks at APEC and speaking with South Korea's president. And then on Thursday, we have that highly highly anticipated meeting between President Trump and CCP leader Xi Jinping. Reporting from Tokyo, Mariotsu, NTD News.
President Trump met with business leaders in Japan today. Around 20 companies from Japan and the United States are exploring projects under Tokyo's pledge to invest $490 billion in America. Here's Trump and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick on giving updates to the deals made during the trip.
It's going to be contributing $10 billion building auto plants throughout the United States. And they are doing it, I think, because of the November 5th election and because of the tariffs. And I was just authorized to make that statement. And we have another company that's going to be contributing at least $10 billion, and I'll give you that name later. We'll keep it a little. They wanted to do it very quietly, and that's okay with me. It could be quiet or not quiet. It's still about, I think, $18 billion. So we're very close to that.
Now you're at 518. Now you're at 518.
If you think about it. So thank you all very much. Great honor. You're great business people, my friends. Almost all of you are friends.
These deals are driven by the Japanese Strategic Investment Initiative, which was created by your tariff policy and by your historic trade agreement with Japan. So that was the underlying reason that we were able to get all these deals done today. So the commitments ensure the economic and national security of the United States of America. We're going to be developing energy. We're going to be developing nuclear, semiconductors, and strengthening the entire domestic supply chain.
Big names like SoftBank, Mitsubishi Electric, and Hitachi are among those expressing interest in fields from energy and AI infrastructure to critical minerals. Westinghouse and GE Vernova are weighing nuclear and power projects worth up to $100 billion, with major Japanese partners potentially involved. Other companies, including Panasonic, Carrier, Murata, TDK, and Fujikura, could join in building the next wave of U.S.-Japan industrial cooperation. Here's the president speaking at a reception with Japanese and U.S. business leaders at the U.S. Embassy.
In so many countries, they invest in the United States, but we've never had anything quite like what's happening, and I think it's going to get better. I can say it now. So we have over $17 trillion of investment in 8 months, and I think by the time we go to the 12-month period, we'll have over $20 or $21 trillion invested, or to be invested, very importantly. I mean, the money's coming in, and a lot of it's commitments that are incredible. Tim Cook is doing, I think, like $600 or $650 billion, right? Think of it. You've done more than the entire group here. I'll be meeting with President Xi the day after tomorrow. I'm going to a wonderful place where I think a lot of you may be going. Xi, as you probably heard, I'd be surprised if anybody didn't hear. That's a big meeting, and I think it's going to work out very well, actually. I think it's going to be great for everybody.
Trump also highlighted fast-track approvals and what he described as record regulation cuts, allowing energy and manufacturing projects to move from proposal to construction much more quickly. He cited new nuclear, oil, and gas developments, rapid growth in AI and chip production, and a national push to restore America as a manufacturing and energy powerhouse. The president called the U.S.-Japan partnership a cornerstone of mutual prosperity and Pacific security.
Coming in, and we have a lot more money coming in. And again, I mentioned SoftBank, but JERA, JCB, Toyota, Mitsubishi, Hitachi, Honda, they're all coming into the United States. We have a lot of car plants opening up because of tariffs. They don't want to pay tariffs, and they come and frankly, Japan is sponsoring many of them because that way you don't have to pay the tariffs. Without the tariffs, I mean, tariffs are about national security. And we're making a lot of money.
Trump vowed there would be shocking numbers when the promised car plants start opening up. The president went on to discuss prices, saying energy prices, gasoline prices, and food prices are down. Trump says an exception is beef, which he promised to get under control. The Senate today failed for the 13th time to advance the House-passed government spending bill. Lawmakers voted 54-45, mostly along party lines. That's as the government shutdown enters its 28th day. Now, more than 5,500 flights have been delayed as air traffic controllers stay home from work. House Speaker Mike Johnson says Republicans have ideas to fix healthcare, but need bipartisan cooperation to move forward.
We're throwing good money at a bad, broken system, and so it needs real reforms. The reason it was never appropriate or never possible to be resolved on a simple CR, stopgap funding measure, is because it's very complicated to fix. But Republicans have a long list of ideas, and I am not going to go in a back room with Chuck Schumer, like he keeps demanding, with 4 people and make this decision. I will not do it. It's not appropriate. It's not right. It's too complicated for that.
Meanwhile, the Department of Agriculture has warned that SNAP food benefits could soon lapse. Speaker Johnson says that contingency funds can't legally be tapped for food stamps because it's a congressionally appropriated finite source of money set aside for emergencies. Some Democrats have accused Republicans of not wanting to negotiate, saying the two sides could probably come up with a solution quickly if they did. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said negotiations are pointless because he believes that Democrats have dug in on their positions. A coalition of states is suing the Trump administration over the suspension of food stamps amid the government shutdown. SNAP benefits reach more than 41 million low-income Americans and collapse by November 1st. The Department of Agriculture said it would not use $6 billion in contingency funds to pay for SNAP benefits. They said over the weekend that the well has run dry. 25 Democratic-led states and the District of Columbia filed a lawsuit in a federal court in Boston today. They want a judge to force the USDA to use available contingency funds for SNAP benefits in November. The states argue that the suspension of benefits violated the law and regulations governing the program. They also argue that the federal government has the money to continue funding SNAP benefits, but are choosing not to. Expect air travel disruptions. The FAA is reporting air traffic controller staffing shortages. This comes as controllers missed their first full paycheck today since the start of the shutdown.
Oftentimes, I'm asked, is the airspace safe? Is it safe to fly? And I would tell you that, yes, it's as safe today as it was 2 months ago. It's safe because we have great men and women who run our facilities that if they don't have the right staffing levels, or if there's distractions in towers, they will slow down the landings and departures in different airports across the country. And what that means for the American people is that means more delays, or that means more cancellations.
Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said 44% of the delays on Sunday and 24% yesterday were because of staffing shortages. He said many controllers are struggling to make ends meet, and they urged the government to reopen. Atlanta and Newark international airports were both short-staffed. With air traffic controllers this morning, not every staffing shortage results in a delay, as controllers can reroute flights. But sometimes there is no choice but to slow planes down to maintain safety. Controllers are considered essential staff and must work during the shutdown despite not being paid. Food stamps are set to be paused next month, and air traffic controllers are now missing their full paychecks due to the ongoing government shutdown. Joining us to discuss is Mike Leon, host of the Can We Please Talk podcast and director of strategy at the Free and Equal Elections Foundation. And we have Tony Kinnett, national correspondent for the Daily Signal and host of the Tony Kinnett Cast radio show and podcast. Good to see you guys. Tony, I'll start with you. We did, in fact, miss you last week. You had other things to take care of. But give us your reaction here, if you wouldn't mind, to the latest news of a group of Democratic-led states, 25 of them, in fact, filing a lawsuit to stop the Trump administration from suspending food stamps. And they're saying they want the administration to use contingency funds. Where do you see this going?
Good to be back with you guys. I will say that my initial reaction to all of this, especially the lawsuit side, it's very short-sighted. The contingency funds that are currently with the U.S. Department of Agriculture are required for certain recoveries after natural disasters. Of course, right now we have the hurricane that's tearing up the Caribbean. There are concerns as we get into the swing of hurricane season that those kind of agricultural funds might be needed to refurbish certain rural areas in the farming communities of the southeastern United States. That's, of course, been stated by one USDA executive. There are some concerns with having used this before. There's some legal precedent from the early aughts that says, hold on just a minute, to put it kind of in short there. So I'm not really sure if that's really going to be the move here. But I agree with Senator John Fetterman, a Democrat of Pennsylvania, probably the most in this. Open the government back up and then start having the discussions about healthcare legislation. The House, again, certain moderate members of the Republican Party have been willing to come forward and fund certain subsidies and things of that nature in the short term. This is a really rough look. Every poll that I've seen right now suggests that trying to use SNAP as a lever against the Republicans is already backfiring, and it hasn't even stopped its funding yet.
So, Mike, let me go to you. What do you think of the situation here with the lawsuit? Agriculture Secretary Rollins has responded, saying that USDA does not have the $9.2 billion it would require. And as well, the agency has said that it can't use the contingency funds because the pending pause is not an emergency. Your thoughts?
Yeah, good to see you guys both. You know, again, in terms of, obviously, I'm not a legal analyst or anything like that, but I'm sure that they've met with their lawyers and consulted them and went through all the legal remedies that they could in terms of trying to get the administration to administer these funds. Because like you said, Don, before we hopped on, there's 40+ million people that rely on these services, right? And that's and they're mostly in red states like Florida, Texas. Those are the states where a lot of folks are going to be impacted by not being able to access this. So in terms of the legal options and avenues, I don't know if I would use the word short-sighted, but I would say that it was vetted by a legal team to see if this was one preventative way to try to get the administration to do this. I mean, again, what's been spent on this program is less than 2% of the federal budget. So in terms of the politics part of this, Don, I mean, you know, Tony kind of touched a little bit about what John Fetterman said and some of the aims back at Republicans. You know, I got to push back on that, Tony, because it doesn't help to put ads with TSA, with Kristi Noem saying that this is all Democrats' fault. We know right now Republicans could open up the government if they went with the nuclear option and did what Democrats wanted to do during the Kyrsten Sinema, Joe Manchin days. And then obviously we would have a way different way of governing in D.C. with respect to the Senate, but the government could be opened back up. I do agree, though, that we need to stop talking into microphones, not us three, the folks like Mike Johnson, like the John Fettermans, and you need to meet in a room because there are no rules right now that say that you can't meet. There's no prohibition against meeting right now. So for Mike Johnson to say in that package before we hopped on that he wasn't going to meet with Chuck Schumer in a room with 4 people because it takes more than that, I agree with the principle of it, sir, but I don't agree with the execution of it. It's time for you guys to negotiate. There are people that we're putting lives at risk, not only in SNAP benefits, air traffic control. I'm flying on a plane next week to go watch my brother get married. Like those folks right now are working without pay, or there are people that are not working their shifts. We're putting people's lives at risk when the government is not open by not having these programs available to folks, by not having these employees get compensated or not even being at their jobs. So it's time to get back in a negotiating room, stop jumping on every Sunday show that you can find and talking about this problem and actually get in a room and solve this problem, both parties.
So, Tony, what do you think? I would imagine this could be a very difficult time for many Americans. Are we seeing a moment right now where, you know, political fights in Washington is translating to real-world human consequences?
Well, I mean, that's really the key. It's not exactly as though both parties are saying, no, we're not moving on this one. Again, there have been Republican measures to pay troops, to extend funding. This is the first time in our government's history we've had a simple, straight, down-the-line, clean resolution proposed. And the opposition party in the Senate, not meeting that 60-vote threshold, as Mike alluded to, just simply said, no, we want all of this extra stuff. We want these temporary programs extended. And Republicans said, well, we'll talk about that, but here's this clean, continuing resolution. And they said, no, it's not in Mike Johnson's purview to sit down and broker a brand new deal. It's on the line. Democrats, again, well, I shouldn't say all Democrats. Many of the Democrats have said no, and they're not meeting that 60-vote threshold because of it. Cortez Masto, of course, Angus King, who caucuses with the Democrats. You've even seen the 2 Georgia senators on a different bill have started to flake away from Schumer's majority of Democrats here. I don't really see a situation in which Republicans can somehow produce a brand new thing that isn't just giving the minority crew what it is that they want here in making these what they promised would be temporary measures 2 years ago during COVID. All of a sudden, those have to be permanent kind of solutions. I don't see any way they can feasibly do that. Even a lot of purple state Republicans would say that their people in their states didn't vote for them to make concessions and end up putting a greater burden on their people outside of just SNAP benefits. Now, I will push back on the Mike suggested of nuking the filibuster here. I'm all for a conversation about the filibuster, but to quote Mitch McConnell in 2013, you might regret that and a lot sooner than you think. When you start nuking norms, I mean, usually that ends up biting the party who plays those games in the butt.
Okay, so Mike, you said earlier that you might be flying soon, and as you know, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said today is the first day air traffic controllers are not getting paid, and he shared a story of a mother who couldn't pay for her 10-year-old daughter's participation in a traveling volleyball team due to the shutdown. So Mike, what is going through your mind as you hear these real human impacts of the government shutdown?
Yeah, I mean, Don, I am flying. I have to go to my brother's wedding. I can't not miss it. But this is the real life consequence of what happens in DC, and it's a part of the reason why, if you look at any poll from Gallup or any other service in terms of mistrust of government and why people don't trust politicians in general, this will come back to roost. This is why when you look at voting, just the 90 million folks that didn't participate in the 2024 elections, if you poll those folks now and ask them, hey, this government shutdown, would you have voted for this, X, Y, or Z? They would have been like, oh, I didn't even know that this was affiliated or affected by that. So it has real life consequences. Not only the air traffic controllers not getting paid, Don, we just had Libby Jamieson. She formerly worked in the Biden administration, and she does something now with military families on our program, talking about the real consequences of military families not getting paid right now. We saw some recent stories of military families lining up at these food banks out there in Maryland, in Upper Maryland. So this is part of the consequence of not getting paid, missing that October 24th paycheck that went out. And so you're going to hear more of these stories. You're going to see it used as a political football by both parties. The Sean Duffy example, notwithstanding, because that's not probably the strongest example, but there are going to be other people right now that are going to go food insecure, that are going to have, whether it be travel disrupted or rely on programs that are a part of their everyday life, Don, right? And it may not mean much to people that make over a certain amount of money, and it may not mean much to people that, already have healthcare benefits through their W-2 job, but there are other people that rely on these services, that FDR and LBJ advanced and all these things that have been done over the last, 67 years. They've relied on these things, and now they're not going to have those things due to this government shutdown. It impacts a lot of people. It's not just getting rid of federal workers and bloated bureaucracy. Everybody is all for getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. It's about these real life programs that people not take advantage of, but rely on because of their situations that are really being impacted by this.
So Tony, I want to hear what you think on this same question. What are you thinking, when controllers are being forced to consider second jobs just to make ends meet?
Well, I mean, I think that's a very dangerous game that you play. That's one of the reasons why that, again, whether it's an air traffic controller, where we're looking at the TSA, where we're looking at security measures, we're looking at government agencies, again, what Mike alluded to very correctly, in all of the programs that, for example, military families use in order to get certain benefits. Those are things that, by the way, I would say traditionally some of what would be considered on the back end of perhaps too government forward programs that are too open and accessible to those who might abuse the system. This is something that Republicans have traditionally been hawkish on. And in this case, Republicans chose not to be as hawkish and say, you know what, clean resolution, the Biden spending levels, here you go, we'll pass it through. And then some Democrats joined in and said, yep, continue, keep it on through, talk about things on the back end. Only one Republican abstained, and that's Rand Paul, and that's because he's more libertarian principled than the Gadsden flag. And so when it comes to looking at this particular instance in American society, I would love to say both parties are at fault here. I'm more than happy to do that. Gets me views when I get out there and say you're all awful. But unfortunately, this really isn't a case I can do that. They passed the clean resolution. There were Democrats who flaked in the House. Jared Golden from Maine is one of them. Now we look over in the Senate. Democrats have flaked over along with the Republicans to pass this continuing resolution, and they're not. And regarding Mike's point about polls and Americans not trusting in government, every single poll, from the Harvard Harris all the way to the Reuters Ipsos, all the way to the Real Clear averages, show that Americans are pretty well above board here when it comes to recognizing who's holding out. I don't think you need to get in a back room for that. If there's a car sitting on the train tracks, God forbid, and the train's coming, and the train in this case is people losing particular benefits, And the Democrats are sitting there saying, I'm not stepping on the gas until we get what we want. And the train's getting closer. Republicans say, okay, we can talk about this. Put your foot on the gas. We're on the tracks. Democrats refuse to say so. That's not a both parties issue. Republicans have already compromised on this. So I don't know if normally, Mike, you and I can agree on the both sides are being ridiculous here. I just don't think that I can kind of say that the scale is as close to 50-50 in being childish for political theater here.
But
and don't get me wrong, I know that Sean Duffy and transportation does that from time to time for sure.
Yeah. Let me just piggyback real quick, because continuing resolution just means 45 more days. So in that train analogy that you gave, if I tell you right now, the train's coming down the track. Actually, wait a minute. We're going to do it in 45 days. We'll be back at this train being on the track. The train's still on the track. The train is still coming. All you're saying is you're allowing more time to negotiate. But that doesn't do anything, because that's just punting. That's just moving it down the block. And the problem I have is right now is Republicans are saying they want bipartisanship, yet there are some Republicans like Josh Hawley, like Rick Scott, that say, hey, we'll just do the nuclear option and we'll just do that. And then there won't be any more bipartisanship. So which one is it? If you want bipartisanship, let's go meet. That's what bipartisanship is. Bipartisanship is meeting. I agree with you that Democrats right now are, but they're in the minority. For months, I heard months on end from surrogates that there was a mandate. The federal government is now in control. The House, the Senate, the presidency, it's all Republican led. The mandate of the American voters was to have the Republicans in control of the government. Well, this is the minority party right now. I know 53 plus 7 is 60, but you have an option to be able to A, open up back the government and not do anything with Democrats anymore. And B, your solution of a continuing resolution just punts it to 45 days from now, where you and I would be on a panel in mid-January seeing who's to blame for this. So it actually doesn't solve anything. All it does is just continue to move it down the pike. And that's the problem I have. It's like, if you want the true bipartisanship, don't go on Sunday shows with ABC News with Jonathan Karl and talk about that it's Chuck Schumer's fault that the government's not open. You should be meeting with Chuck Schumer that Sunday. You shouldn't even be at the ABC studios.
He's already turned down those meetings. That's going into a meeting with Chuck Schumer and saying, okay, pass the continuing resolution. He says no. They've already done that. They've already done those meetings. Chuck Schumer saying they need to get into a back room in a closet with us and agree on this. And they refuse to move. Republicans have already compromised. I've already seen Mike Lawler's bill in the House. I've already seen measures in the Senate. Nuking the filibuster is not a negotiation tactic here. And I agree with slapping at Scott and Hawley here. Hawley being quite the populist who's willing for a kind of will of the people approach on the Republican line, who are not leading conferences in the Senate. The populist voice who says, fine, we'll just nuke the filibuster because we don't want SNAP to go away. I mean, a 45-day extension is better than seeing SNAP and air traffic control go out right now. It's a trolley problem. There is no actual solution here where all of a sudden Republicans and Democrats act responsible. I mean, we have to Kissinger this or the benefits go away. And I was told the Democrat Party was all about understanding that people have real needs and people are going to suffer and they're going to hurt and it's going to be terrible. And all of a sudden, the bleeding heart liberals have gone out to pasture and they're hanging military families out to dry. I was told that was the party who never hung people out to dry. And all of a sudden, it's colder than a third showing on an off-Broadway show. So at this point, I'm wondering, where does the theatrics stop and when do we actually look at the pragmatism here? Because I'm just not seeing it. And maybe that is where we get to the filibuster nuking thing, which I still would turn down. I think the filibuster should be amendmented. And then, of course, we'd have to discuss, how that looked on the other end. But I think it's more of a trolley problem than, perhaps is currently allowed.
Okay, great points raised by both of you. I'll just end with Mike today since, Tony, I started with you. Any final thoughts?
That's right, Tony. I get to finish this segment. Forget about that.
That's right.
I want to read you something Nancy Jacobson said, my friend over at No Labels. I think you know who she is. She wrote this in The Hill. She said, there are 3 reasons this scenario is becoming more likely in terms of potentially forcing the nuclear option. But she said very cleanly, Tony, Democrats have no leverage. In any negotiation, leverage only exists when the other side wants something. President Trump doesn't place a high value on reopening the government. To him, a shutdown is an opportunity to act unilaterally to fire government workers and save money. So back to the overarching premise of what you mentioned, right? We could blame Democrats because they offered the 7 votes to get you to 60. But President Trump has shown no propensity to open it back up because it falls in line with what he wants to do in terms of the bloated bureaucracy of all of these agencies and getting rid of federal government workers. And the problem is not the back and forth of you and I going through the numbers and all that. The problem is there are real life human beings right now that are relying on these government benefits, that work these government jobs. They're not getting paid. The people that take advantage of these services, and I mean advantage not in a negative connotation, I mean it in a positive way, they are not going to get those services. And this is going to continue to happen, whether it be 45 days from now or whether it be right now. And that is the problem that you and I think both are on the same page, that both parties need to come to this resolution.
Well, all right. I think we can leave the conversation here today. I'm sure more can be said, but we'll continue if the government is still shut down next week on this topic. Thank you very much for today, both of you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
President Trump is in Japan on the second stop of his Asia diplomacy tour. What are his economic objectives? We discuss with an analyst after this break.
painting.ntdtv.com.
Shop the Design Studio by Mathis Home for Black Friday savings on luxury designer furniture. Get factory authorized savings on all the top brands with heirloom quality pieces for every room in your house. Choose from our incredible in-stock selection or let our complimentary design staff help you create a custom look to match your own personal style for less than you ever imagined. Get unmatched luxury at the lowest prices of the year through Black Friday weekend at the Design Studio by Mathis Home.
Hunger in America is a crisis. Let's end it together. Our America. Built on hard work, determination, and grit. Sometimes the days run long, but hope, it never runs out. Even when the food does, for America's veterans, working parents, even kids. Because in every corner of every town, even yours, millions of hardworking neighbors are facing a hunger crisis, many for the very first time. In this land of plenty, affording food shouldn't require second jobs and third shifts or choosing between your groceries and bills. Today, you can help change that. Call or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, less than 63 cents a day, to help every neighbor get the food they urgently need. Because taking care of each other is what makes America strong. We're Feeding America, not just a name, but an action. Working with over 200 local food banks like the ones in your community, and demand is soaring.
You go to the grocery store, you spend $100, and $100 is a new $20 bill.
Even with 2 full-time jobs, it's hard to make ends meet.
These are tough times, but when we stand together, we become the very best of a strong America. Call or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org. Just $19 a month can feed a family today. And your first gift can double an impact. Plus, we'll send you this free canvas bag as a reminder of the hope you're delivering.
When it comes down to it, it's about taking care of your family first and the loved ones that you need to provide for.
Because you're not just giving food, you're fueling resilience for people across the nation. You're feeding America. Call or go online today to helpfeedingamerica.org, and your gift can double an impact.
Pain for the makers of Tylenol. The Texas Attorney General has filed a lawsuit against the companies Johnson & Johnson and Kenvue. The suit claims they deceptively marketed Tylenol to pregnant mothers. It also alleges that the medication is tied to an increased risk of autism. The filing comes about a month after President Trump publicly claimed the use of Tylenol during pregnancy can be associated with an increased risk of autism in children. In a statement, Johnson & Johnson said it divested its consumer health business years ago and all rights and liabilities associated with Tylenol are owned by Kenvue. In a statement, Kenvue said the medication is safe and the company will vigorously defend against the claims. Turning now to the New York City mayoral race, which has gained a lot of interest as Election Day approaches. NTD's Paul Graney joined Dave Martin at the Data Hub to break down the three-man race. Take a look.
We're joined at the Data Hub by election data analyst Dave Martin. Dave, great to see you.
And great to see you, Paul.
Dave, the banner race this year is the New York City mayoral race. A crowded field even after Adams dropped out. What are polls telling us right now?
Let's take a look at one. Let's take a look at a recent one just from earlier this month. This is a Gotham AAR people of likely voters earlier this month. Here we go. Choice for mayor of New York City, number one in the lead, Zohran Mamdani at 43%. Now, right behind him, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo coming in at 29%. Now, Cuomo was a Democrat running as an independent after Mamdani beat him in the June Democrat primary. In third place, Curtis Sliwa, the Republican candidate, at 19.5%. And then we've got 8.5% undecided or other voters. Now, if we rewind 4 years to the 2021 race for mayor, here we go.
Wow.
Here we go. Current mayor Eric Adams won this, getting 67.5%, 2/3 of the vote here. Curtis Sliwa came in at second at 28%. Now, Adams, though, he was running as a re-election. He was independent, but he dropped out about a month ago. He was actually polling behind Curtis Sliwa in fourth place. So he dropped out. So now we just have a three-man race here.
But Dave, this is significant. 68, give or take, to 27. But Eric Adams is a much different candidate than the front-runner Zohran Mamdani. There are many people, he's a Democratic Socialist. There are many people calling for either Sliwa or Cuomo to drop out of the race in order to prevent Mamdani from winning. What would happen if either Sliwa or Cuomo dropped out?
Well, that's a very good question, Paul. Let's actually take a look, because clearly they are taking votes from each other in this poll. This is the same poll here. This is the Gotham poll, Gotham AAR people of likely voters. If Andrew Cuomo dropped out, all of a sudden you'd see a Zohran Mamdani. He gets about a 3-point bump here, up to about 47% if Cuomo drops out. But the real winner here is going to be Curtis Sliwa. He gets up to 32%. That's a 12-point bump if Cuomo drops out. And actually, the undecided actually gets the biggest jump here, up to 22%. There's a 14-point bump right here. Now, if you look at these numbers, you say, all right, well, it is mathematically possible then for Sliwa, if he gets a majority of these undecideds, that he can possibly overtake Mamdani. But a closer look at this 22% shows that about 74%, about 3/4 of them are actually Democrats. So it seems highly unlikely that they would actually vote for a Republican. Now, if we look at the inverse, what if Sliwa dropped out here? You're going to say choice for mayor. Zohran Mamdani will give...
Much closer.
Yeah, much closer. Mamdani only goes up 1 point if Sliwa comes out. Now, Cuomo, though, is the big winner in this case.
And I'm going to point out, that's within the margin of error, Dave. That's within the margin of error.
You got it exactly right, just within. He goes up, what, 14 points here? I'm sorry, 12 points. Just to 3.9% behind here. There. Undecideds is about a 6-point jump. And yes, as you pointed out, he is just within the margin of error right here. So it's very clear Cuomo and Sliwa are definitely taking votes from each other.
Well, there are calls for this to be the final race. Sliwa says he's not going to do it. Looking at him, he's probably not going to do it, but this is interesting. Now, does anything from the presidential race last year, any indication on how Trump performed and how the sentiment towards Republicans or more towards conservative values may affect this race coming up next week?
Yeah, I mean, that generally is a good indicator. If you look last year, Kamala Harris took 55, she took New York State winning 55%, but specifically in New York City, if you look here, these are the 5 boroughs of New York City added up. She took 69% of the vote, while Trump took 30. Harris took 4 of the 5 boroughs there, with Staten Island the only one voting for Trump. No surprise, though, in largely Democratic city would vote for Kamala Harris there. So that's one indicator, anyway, from the last year, the presidential results.
It's a blue city, Dave.
It's a blue city.
There's no way around it. You're going to be here all week, right?
I'm going to be here all week, Paul.
That's great.
An AI company's latest findings show that Chinese-owned TikTok seems to be promoting content related to Zohran Mamdani. So how did they find out about it? The company analyzed millions of TikTok videos through a program built on TikTok's leaked documents. NTD's Flora Hua has more.
The leaked documents exist on GitHub, where engineers share open source codes and programs. And these codes are part of TikTok's training materials for newly hired software engineers. The tech firm Spring AI built a computer model with these codes and wanted to test out how TikTok decides on which content to promote from the way people engage with it. The AI researchers had tested millions of videos with this model, and they noticed that some content was getting unexplained promotion. One type stood out: the videos supporting Mamdani, which many described as socialist or even communist due to his extreme political views. Meanwhile, the researchers found videos backing the moderate Democratic candidate Andrew Cuomo were being quietly pushed to the sidelines. TikTok rejected the accusation, calling the study not based on any form of reality. This is not the first time the short video platform has faced criticism of political bias. Israeli officials have accused TikTok of routinely taking down their content. 2 years ago, several conservative TikTok content creators also experienced a similar situation. They said the platform had deleted much of their content or forced them to switch to new accounts. Last year, in congressional hearings, TikTok was accused of pushing Beijing's narratives on U.S. soil, including the cover-up of human rights abuses in Xinjiang or Tibet. CCP officials are also taking executive roles in TikTok's parent company, ByteDance. Now the Trump administration is pushing China to divest TikTok to American companies. But Beijing has already classified TikTok's algorithm as its controlled export technology, which Americans cannot own, but only use it with China's license. This raises concerns of how the app could shape Americans' way of thinking, especially their political views. Flora Hua, NTD News.
Election Day 2025 is coming up in just 1 week. NTD's Steve Lance and Tiffany Meyer will bring you our live special coverage of all the biggest races from New York's mayoral election to the governor races in New Jersey and Virginia. Tune in on Tuesday, November 4th at 7 p.m. to get the latest election results with live analysis from our data reporters and our on-the-ground teams. That's Tuesday, November 4th, starting 7 p.m. only here on NTD. Don't miss it. The Federal Reserve is expected to cut interest rates by a quarter point this week, and President Trump is in Japan now for his second stop on his Asia diplomacy tour. Joining us to discuss is Daniel Lacalle, chief economist at Tresses Hedge Fund, international financial analyst, and author of the book Freedom or Equality. Daniel, always good to see you. Can I just ask you, how do you feel about the size of the expected cut at a 0.25%?
Well, I think it's logical. It's what everybody expected. The Fed continues to be very aggressive in its messages about inflation when inflation is nowhere to be found. And obviously that is hurting Americans and it's hurting families and small and medium enterprises in particular. But a 25 basis points cut is at least within expectations and part of a broader cut that is likely to happen in the next 3 meetings.
But let me ask you this. We got the inflation numbers a couple days ago, about a week. So with inflation still above target, do you think easing monetary policy makes sense?
Well, we have to remember what has caused inflation in the United States. No, you have to remember that usually people think that increasing rates is a way of controlling inflation because that would reduce money supply. However, what happened between 2022 and 2024 is that the Fed increased rates, but at the same time, the government continued to overspend. Deficit spending went through the roof and inflationary pressures were the same. So what happened was that elevated rates hurt families and small and medium enterprises while the government continued to spend like there was no tomorrow. So what is happening right now is that the inflationary pressures are coming down precisely because the government is reducing expenditure, reducing the amount of money created. However, you need to cut rates because small and medium enterprises and families have been really affected. First, by the Fed's wrong policies regarding inflation in between 21 and 23, and with the rate hikes of 24 and 23. Those elements are negative for small and medium enterprises. And basically what we need to understand is that those do not cause inflation. What causes inflation is the increase in government spending.
All right, I also wanted to talk to you about Trump's Asia trip. What would you say is the overarching objective of his 6-day visit on the trade front?
I think there are three main objectives. Objective number one is to strengthen the relationship between the United States and Japan. Japan has been selling treasuries in the past years, trying to defend the yen, unsuccessfully, to be honest. And with the new prime minister sharing a lot of economic policies and a lot of viewpoints with the Trump administration, there would be an opportunity to strengthen the ties with Japan and get Japan to go back to purchasing treasuries. No? The second one is aiming at China, is looking at the importance of building very, very strong ties with technology giants like to China and beat them in terms of trade, in terms of rare earths, in terms of all of those elements that seem to be creating tensions between the United States and China. So it's an important element. Japan is a big rare earth provider. And the third one is financial. No, both the United States and Japan are part of the SWIFT environment, and Japan needs the United States' strength in the financial market to reduce the pressures on long-term bond yields. So all those elements, treasuries, trade, and an alliance in everything that has to do with rare earths are elements that are significant, added to the financial part.
So Daniel, as you know, all eyes are on China because a deal with China is at the center of this tour, right? What are the stakes here? What would happen if the U.S. cannot reach a deal on tariffs and rare earths?
Well, I think that if they don't reach a deal, it's going to certainly reduce the optimism from markets regarding the economy in 2026, because it will be negative for China and it will be negative for the United States technology advancement. But I think that the situation right now is a situation in which the United States has the upper hand precisely because of the deal reached with Japan right now. If you remember, reaching an agreement with the UK in terms of trade was absolutely critical to reach an agreement with the European Union that seemed to drag its feet. In this case, I think it's also very similar. Reach an agreement with Japan that immediately reduces the dependence on rare earths from China, reduces the dependence of some of critical elements from China, and forces the Chinese negotiators to reach a more positive deal that would ultimately be essential for both economies. China cannot go ahead without a trade deal. We have already seen how it is impossible for China to offset the US market with other markets, and at the same time, the United States thinks quite rightly so that there is an opportunity to reestablish trade relationships with China from a more leveling playing field environment.
Okay, so in a sense, in a nutshell here, Daniel, are you saying that more successful negotiations with Japan, stronger cooperation will put the U.S. in a stronger position in negotiations with the upcoming meeting with China?
I think so. I think that the agreement with the Japanese Prime Minister is absolutely critical to show to China that it's not just something that the Chinese government can delay endlessly, that it creates a significant change in the balance of power in terms of the trade negotiations.
So would China be losing this card, so to speak, if the U.S. can diversify its supply chains when it comes to rare earth minerals?
That is for sure. That is absolutely clear. If China plays too aggressively the limitations on rare earths as a key element of its trade negotiations, the United States can immediately go to other suppliers and sort the situation very, very quickly. To be fairly honest, actually, in a very substantial way compared to what was perceived maybe 3 years ago. Big development there.
Okay, so before going to Japan, Trump visited other Southeast Asian countries, and one of the things that Trump talked about was trade imbalances with those countries. Can you speak to what is driving the Trump administration's focus on these trade imbalances with nations like Vietnam and Malaysia?
For example, Vietnam is well known for utilizing its borders for origin washing. No? There are a number of non-tariff barriers that are limitations for U.S. companies, particularly in automotive parts, also in soybeans, in agricultural products, in farming products, in chemicals. So it's not tariffs. A lot of the headlines that I read these days are about, there's no tariff impact. No, it's not about tariffs. It's about those significant regulatory, administrative, and taxation burdens that limit the trade with the United States, while those governments at the same time are giving a preferential treatment to China in some cases, like is the case of Japan, of Vietnam, and therefore creating that imbalance that the Trump administration is saying. Basically, what is the imbalance? The imbalance is that the United States companies have significantly higher burdens to export to those nations, while those nations favor other political allies in a more aggressive way, and therefore they're creating this very, very significant difference in as I said before, in automotive parts, in agricultural, and also in farming products and chemicals. Chemicals very important.
So Daniel, just one last question here. Vietnam and Malaysia pledged to buy more U.S. goods to narrow their surpluses. Can I ask you, do these purchase commitments historically work in reducing trade imbalances?
Very rarely, but I don't think that the Trump administration is looking to eliminate the trade deficit. What is looking is to eliminate or at least significantly reduce the unfair treatment of U.S. companies, which is different. We all agree that if there's a trade deficit based on the open and free cooperation between free companies, that is okay. And that benefits both nations. That benefits consumers and benefits the nations. The problem is when the trade deficit has absolutely nothing to do with the Ricardian view of trade and has everything to do with regulatory, administrative, taxation, and non-tariff barriers that shift the trading patterns to support China and hurt the U.S. That is what the U.S. administration is trying to at least reach an equilibrium in terms of not the amount of trade, but the fairness of that trade.
Well, all right, Daniel, really appreciate you giving us your time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Don. Always a pleasure.
Beijing is trying to pitch itself as an alternative to what it calls U.S. protectionism. The regime signaled an expanded free trade pact with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. That's ahead of a planned meeting between President Trump and Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping this week. Here's more.
China signed an upgraded free trade deal with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, on Tuesday. The 11-member bloc is China's biggest trading partner, with bilateral trade totaling $771 billion last year. Beijing is seeking to strengthen its ties with ASEAN to counter hefty import tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump. Beijing's Commerce Ministry said the upgraded agreement includes sections on digital, the green economy, and other new industries. It was signed at the summit of ASEAN leaders, which Trump also attended on Sunday at the start of a trip through Asia. Talks on the upgraded deal began in November 2022 and ended in May this year, just after Trump's tariff offensive kicked off. Beijing has been seeking to position itself as a more open economy, even as it courts criticism for expanding export restrictions on rare earths and other critical minerals. The US and China extended a trade truce this weekend in Kuala Lumpur. Negotiators hashed out an agreement for Trump and Xi Jinping to decide on later this week when they meet in Seoul.
Taiwan says its relationship with the United States is stable and that there is close cooperation between the two sides. The country's foreign minister made the remarks today ahead of President Trump's upcoming meeting this week with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping.
Because our Taiwan-U.S. relations are very stable. No matter whether on security, trade and business and other areas, there is close cooperation. We're a member of APEC and have a representative to participate in the APEC summit.
Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te said today that Israel is a model for the island nation to learn from in strengthening its defenses. He cited the biblical story of David versus Goliath on the need to stand up to authoritarianism. Taiwan has been a strong backer of Israel since the 2023 Hamas-led attack on that country. Lai says Jewish people have suffered constant persecution throughout their history. He added that appeasement has never been a way to stop authoritarian governments. Lai says the concept of peace through strength is a maximum that Israel, U.S., and Taiwanese societies have had for years. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu orders strikes in Gaza after accusing Hamas of violating the ceasefire. Hamas threatens to delay the handover of hostage remains held in the enclave. Stay tuned for more news after this break.
Shenyun Creations, the streaming platform from Shenyun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore shenyuncreations.com.
I saw war, bombing, shooting. I'm worried for my future.
كتير رعب وطبعا هلا يعني أنا بحس بالرعب الكبير بدنا بس نعيش بأمان.
Conflict is raging across the world, and millions of children's lives are being devastated by war, hunger, disease, and poverty. We urgently need your help to reach children in crisis. Please call or go online to give just $10 a month, only 33 cents a day. We need 1,000 new monthly donors this month to help children in crisis around the world and right here at home. You can help us provide food, essentials, and life-saving medical care to children in the most need.
حريتنا يعني بدنا نعيش زي كل الأطفال بدنا نعيش بحرية وأمان.
In the darkest times, children suffer the most. You can help by calling right now and giving just $10 a month. All we need are 1,000 monthly donors. Please call or go online now. Your donation today can help secure additional grants, which can multiply the impact of your support up to 10 times. And when you call with your credit card, we will send you the Save the Children tote bag as a thank you for your support.
وعيت عن هاي الدنيا القصف والنزوح والصيمة. أتمنى نعود على بلادنا